What would have happened if Nick Chubb never got hurt against Tennessee in 2015? I know we're not, hypothetical questions are always complicated and sometimes a little silly. But I do want to ask that question right now because I think that's a curious question to ask out loud. Stay tuned at the end to get your Stuckey's scoop. Let me make sure I point to it correctly. Woo. What happens if Nick Chubb in 2015 doesn't get hurt against Tennessee? Now, let's remember where we're at with this thing. Things were starting to spiral out of control as that game went on. Georgia had lost the week before to Alabama and a lopsided loss in the rain. They got up on Tennessee by about 3 scores and lost the game in Knoxville. And I think that was the game that really cost Mark Richt his job. If it wasn't that one, it was certainly a few weeks later in Jacksonville. But if Georgia doesn't lose to Tennessee that day, does Mark Richt get fired for sure? I don't know. Do they lose to the Gators in Jacksonville in 2015? Do they even start Fatone Bauta? I mean, that was the crazy decision. But, I was right there when Nick Chubb got hurt, and it was one of the worst moments. It sounded worse than anything I'd ever heard on a sideline. And he was about 5 feet from me. He was running. The play came to Georgia's left, and I was on the sideline that Nick started running towards. And I had a very large 600 millimeter lens, 500, whatever it was. And Nick came out of he was out of the picture because it was so tight. So I pulled back and was getting ready for another camera. So I saw right the way he landed, and I knew something was wrong. He landed, started rolling out of bounds, and he wound up about 5 feet from me. It was a horrible sound. Took his helmet off quickly. And, I'd been around Nick a little bit, not a lot, and met him when he was going into his senior year of high school. He was a junior at the time. And this was not a guy that got hurt. He played hurt against South Carolina in 2014. He was the engine that drove the program because so many guys had gotten hurt, or Todd Gurley got hurt at the end of 14. He had been suspended during some of it. Sonny Michel had gotten hurt during 14, and Nick was the only guy they had. It was him and Brennan Douglas, and Nick made it go. And then all of a sudden, just like that, Nick got hurt. And I do wonder, if Nick stays healthy in 15 and has a full 16, does he stick around for 2017, even if Mark Richt is let go at the end of the 15 season, like probably would have happened? It really was. It's a good question because it's something we can't ever know, and it's just something to talk about. It's not any sort of I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer here, but what happens? Does he leave after 3 years and become a first-round draft pick, or did he have to come back? Would Mark still be the head coach at Georgia now? I don't think he probably would still be the head coach at Georgia, but it's curious. No one moment really changes history. A lot of things add up, and it seems like it's that one moment. But when you had that 15 situation, Georgia was extremely limited at quarterback because Grayson Lambert was starting, and that was just not ideal. And then you had Nick, who was the engine for their offense, an offense that was struggling, but managed to beat everybody else they played besides Tennessee, Florida, and Alabama. It was, again, very limited. But the look on Nick's face, the sound of his voice on the sideline, Georgia's staff immediately got over there, but it was too late. And then as the day went on, Nick was on the sideline. They had wrapped his knee, and Tennessee had become a place where Georgia had sustained injuries on the field, on the playing surface, and even off of it. In 2000, I think it was 13 or 11, but I believe it was 13. Mark Richt sliced his hand wide open in a post-game press conference because of some sort of sharp thing that was on the podium there. I mean, it had become like a really, you're just happy to get out alive kind of place. And that day they couldn't get out alive. They lost their best player, and there was uncertainty about Nick's return even going into the 16 season. You know, if you remember, there was not a certainty that that he would really be himself in 16, and a lot of people don't think that he was. But in 16, Jacob Eason was starting, and Nick was asked to do a lot, and they kind of went away from the run game, and after a while, and it took about 18 months to get it right, and then Nick really seemed like himself in 17. He seemed completely like himself that year, but I'll never forget when he got hurt like that, and I wonder sometimes what the ramifications from his injury could be or were. I think any notion that Mark would have kept his job coming out of the 15 season went away as soon as Nick got hurt, because they just weren't going to win the Florida game. I mean, Grayson Lambert couldn't do it. I would have still started Grayson Lambert. This is another conversation for another time. You know, because if they had beaten Florida, they would have gone to Atlanta and, you know, this, that, and the other. But they went with Tony Balta. That was a mistake. But you didn't have Nick. You know, Sony without Nick was really good, but you'd rather have both. And I do wonder, and y'all can tell me what you think about that. But the Stuckey's scoop about Nick Chubb is he is probably the quietest, maybe football player I've ever been around. He just doesn't have a lot to say. He is committed for sure, a very hard worker. People overuse the word quiet confidence because Zamir is quiet too. He's Zamir White. But Nick is probably the quietest superstar in college football that I've been around in a long time. You think about Cam Newton, Tim Tebow, Johnny Manziel, even Derrick Henry has more to say than Nick Chubb. But it's hard. I don't know if there's any more a person that Georgia fans really want to cheer for other than Nick Chubb. And they love Herschel Walker, but Herschel Walker's an older man now, and it's just different. With Nick, he's still in the prime of his career, and we're going to see what Nick does moving forward. Speaking as a Nick Chubb fan, he's hard to deal with. Boy, I'll tell you one other thing. You do not want to tackle him. That is not a lot of fun. You'd better be delivering the blow because he's going to hit you, and he's going to hit you hard.